Hi everyone, my name is Roza Calderón and I am a human rights activist and a social community organizer in the United States. And I'm very grateful to be here with you today to discuss the Black Lives Matter movement and discuss what has actually brought us to this moment right now. I just wanted to start off with a quick history lesson about our nation, about our elected officials, our public servants, peace officers, and our Black brothers and sisters. 1619 was the first year that Black people were brought over to the United States as part of the slave trade. 1619, as you know, was 401 years ago. I recently saw a sign at a protest that said, "Protesting racism in America appears to be a protest against America because it is so embedded into our culture." And the truth is that it is. Looking back at our history, slaves were not a second-class citizen. They were property. Property that gave wealthy white men their worth based on the amount of slaves that they owned and how many they had working on the stolen lands of indigenous people. Those same men are the ones who laid their beliefs down as the foundation of entire states, the first colonies, and finally, when they broke away from the crown, the idea that all men are created equal was written only for those same wealthy white men for the new nation. Police forces were initially established to catch runaway slaves, to return them back to their owners. Those patrols, which were called slave patrols, were laid down the roots of the policing that we still see today, that still subjected Black Americans to whippings, imprisonment, and lynchings, which were just made a federal crime about 2 weeks ago in the United States. So we're really, really far behind when it comes to racial justice. The other part of it's that the policing was a way to keep Black people under control after the Civil War. For example, when they were technically free, they were still only 3/5 worth of one white man. The segregation laws, the Jim Crow laws, came soon after. Then we had the school to prison pipeline. And now we have the rewriting of the Jim Crow laws as the 1994 crime bill that has led to mass incarceration in the United States and has continued to keep Black Americans under oppression. So it's a lot of history to unpack, a lot of pain, a lot of anger, just a lot that has never been resolved and discussed. For me, I came to the US as a child refugee from El Salvador. And when we first got here, we lived in East LA, right off of Rampart Boulevard, where my family owned a very small mail services business. My sister and I even shared a closet. That was our bedroom. And what we saw was an uprise of the people demanding justice, demanding accountability for the police officers that had beaten Rodney King. An uprise of enough with the police brutality, enough of the policing of our neighborhoods. And one of my earliest memories was seeing the Rodney King video on replay where the police officers were hitting him and beating him. And I guess I didn't really understand why a peace officer would treat anyone like that. I didn't really understand the racial slur that the police officers were saying to Rodney as they beat him. But if you fast forward 3 decades now, I still see and feel the pain that I felt then. In college, I studied geography, and as many of you know, we don't have any more lands to discover, but one of the things that we do study frequently and extensively is space and our use of space, the way that we navigate through the world. So for example, women and the way that they are able to told not to go into a dark alley per se alone because they could be walking in a place of danger. Black people are limited in the spaces that they navigate. If you've heard of Trayvon Martin, he was out of place walking in his own neighborhood with a hoodie on and a bag of Skittles. Ahmaud Arbery was a young man who was out for a jog and was hunted down like an animal by white supremacists who at some point held a position of power, and that's how they were able to protect themselves from the law. Then we have a list of endless names: Philando Castile, Jamar Clark, George Floyd. Um, but it is no longer a question about public spaces that can mean life or death for anybody who engages with law enforcement. Here, currently I'm in Texas, and in Fort Worth, there was a woman who was spending time with her nephew, Tiana Jefferson, and she was killed on sight by a police officer. Now we have Breonna Taylor, who was killed unarmed and unaware as they were serving a warrant in her home. So our use of space is very important. Our use of space is what allows us to navigate safely, to feel that we're at home, to be able to bring our communities together. Those are all parts of our space. For me, one of the things that I've noticed since I am an immigrant who lives in the United States is that I've always been asked where I'm from. And in moments of true racism, I'm told to go back to my own country. So I can only feel the pain that our Black brothers and sisters feel, that our brown and indigenous communities also feel. But I can't imagine being here for 400 years or the inception of this nation and still not feel at home. Still not feeling like you can walk into a store and not be followed, drive through a town and not be stopped, go bird watching and not have somebody who is supposedly your ally call the cops because they know the fate that you will be met with if a police officer comes by. So Black Lives Matter is something that we want to address as Black Lives Matter too. People argue that all lives matter, and that's true. But until Black lives are taken into account and they matter too, then none of us matter. In the United States, our elected officials have decided that cutting funding to key social service programs that we need desperately, like healthcare, mental health, drug addiction, are things that we can defund and provide that funding to police departments so that they can take care of those issues. So the solution that these public servants have found is to pile responsibility on top of responsibility onto our law enforcement. They have equipped them with militarized gear that looks like they're going into war, and they have moved them away from being peace officers who are supposed to engage in conflict resolution. But now they're in combat gear, combat mode, and they look at the people as if we are the enemy. Some departments see their budgets increased, and others have to do all these things that I just mentioned to you, deal with the homelessness, deal with mental health issues with absolutely no additional funding and no additional training. And of course, we've all seen the videos of the bad cops. We've seen the good videos of the good cops. But even those videos are bad because we have good cops following bad protocols. One of the things that not many people are aware of is that the training that these officers are now receiving is exactly what you see. The three officers that were standing around George Floyd when the public was telling them to check his pulse to see if he was still alive, they technically, according to the police, were not doing anything wrong because they were following the protocols of those police departments. But if the protocols of those police departments mean that arresting somebody matters more than their life, then those are bad protocols and bad police departments. When we first came out here to visit in Texas, one of the things that I remember the most is that a sheriff pulled us over and said that we needed to be very careful if we were going to be pulled over by officers in the nearest town of Mineral Wells. Mineral Wells, Texas actually just had a very violent hate crime where a white man stabbed a black man, and luckily the young people here were active enough to start a protest, and they had a Black Lives Matter march here in a very Republican conservative place where they were threatened with their lives, essentially. And so here is the sheriff telling me that we have bad cops in Mineral Wells who are untrained and to try to avoid any interaction with them. And that's one of the things that most people are not aware of, that we are now afraid of our own police departments, that now when we think of being in danger, we don't know who we can call. And the most unfortunate part of all of that is that if these cops act in a way that may put our lives in danger, the lives of citizens in danger, they are protected by something that is called qualified immunity, which is a law at the congressional level that can prevent them from ever being met with justice and accountability. The worst part is that we also have good cops who remain silent and motionless, and we have people who have to take it to the streets to demand that our lives matter, to demand better, and instead we are met with force and curfews to shut us down, to tell us that we cannot engage within our First Amendment right in the Constitution for a peaceful protest. And all we are demanding are simple, basic human rights and dignity for all. The most basic things that we're asking for is that we demand an end to police brutality. We are demanding reform within the police departments to engage in more conflict resolution training. We demand accountability to make sure that when something like this does happen, that it's not just seen as the cop was doing his job, regardless of the pain that it inflicted or the lives that were lost. We are demanding justice. What we want is for people to find their empathy and to not diminish the experiences of our Black brothers and sisters by their own experiences because they haven't felt racism, because they don't have to live it every single day. But I believe that we can all do our part, not just here in the US, but for me, I can do my part as a Latina. I can do my part because Latinos are not exempt of being racist. The conversation is at home with my family. It is spearheading racism within the Latino communities to fight for the rights of our Afro-Latino brothers and sisters and to end racist slurs. One of the things I want everyone to ask themselves is, what are you going to do to make sure that that doesn't just happen here in the United States, but also in Argentina? What are you going to do so that that does not happen in the places where we live, in the places where we should have a unified community? What conversations are you willing to engage in to change the course of our history? And with that, I leave you, with the goal that you will also take this battle into your own hands, because I don't want you to feel that you're small. I want you to think that no matter what, we are giants, because together we can bring about the change that we need now. Thank you so much for your time.